Hello, everybody, and welcome to International Podcast Day 2020. I am Dave Lee, co-founder of International Podcast Day, and we are very excited to bring a French podcasting panel to you for International Podcast Day. I would like to welcome Fanny, Anne, and Benjamin. How are you three doing today?
Super great.
Pretty well.
Good. Well, I'm very excited to have you. As I mentioned pre-show, that every year we love to have the French podcasting space represented on our events. And thank you, Fanny, for organizing this panel. And I'm really looking forward to what you're going to share. But before we get into that, I did want to give a little shout out and thank you to our sponsors. You can find them over at internationalpodcastday.com/sponsors. We have amazing sponsors this year, including Blueberry, Focusrite, and Podient. Make sure you head over to that website, grab some of their promo codes because you can get some free trials. You can get some discount codes for their services. So definitely appreciate that. Of course, without their support, this event would not be possible, along with the amazing 60 plus podcasters from around the world featured from 26 different countries. Without their energies, their efforts, and volunteering their time, our event would not be possible. So without further ado, I want to turn over the International Podcast Day stream to Fanny, Anne, and Benjamin. Thank you both so much. We are looking very much forward to the French and unique European focus on podcast and the podcasting experience. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for inviting.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Here are the French fries talking about podcaster today. So let me just introduce you, everybody. So I'm Fanny Cohen Moreau. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram because I have a podcast, which is Passion Médiéviste. I'm talking about, medieval ages with a guest. We are studying medieval ages and tell you why medieval ages is actually very important. And today I have two amazing guests with different point of view about podcast and different experience, and that's why you're blushing, Benjamin. That's why I thought you will both be very interesting about podcast. So Benjamin, I don't know how to call you, Benjamin Saeptem Hours. You're from the website Slate, the French Slate.fr. Can you talk more about you?
Yeah, of course. So I'm the head of podcast there. So Slate.fr is a French version of Slate, like a little sister, completely independent from the US version. And I've been there for almost 2 years now, doing podcast. What about us? We're producing like 100 and 1,000 shows. No, I'm kidding. Like maybe 20, 25 shows a year, new shows a year. It's been 2 very exciting years, and we'll be talking about it a bit later, I guess.
Oh, yeah. And then you and Claire, actually, you're not in France. You're in Barcelona. Oh, okay. Keep you representing you. I have to. That's the thing of podcast. I just have to share what's in my. I present you. Go. Excuse me.
I guess, Claire, you have to
Let me introduce you, Anne-Claire. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. So I am Anne-Claire. I'm working in the podcasting field for 2 years and a half. I have created a mobile application to allow people to discover more easily some new podcasts they would love and they would share with the people in the application, because there is a social twist in this application. And moreover, I'm running a training program for independent podcasters, and I'm helping them through events, through coaching, through pedagogic courses to build their brand, build their visibility to attract even more people to listen to the content they are creating.
And we know that's like a super difficult thing to do, because like discoverability of podcasts is like
that's
a thing that we have not cracked yet.
Yes, that's a big pain point for them. They're really passionate. They really want to create the best content, but sometimes they struggle to get known and to be to get feedback, and so I'm helping them with my competencies and all my passion to to attract more people.
We will talk about what is the main issues we have in France and maybe the answers we can give to help people have a good podcast. So just as an introduction, before I ask you some questions, I will give for the international audience some key about the podcast in France. And actually, a long time ago, no, not quite a long time ago, but in France, we have some people who are making podcasts like for a long time ago. You have people like Arte Radio. It's from, okay, that's the part. I don't know how to speak English as well as I wanted. In France, with Arte Radio is oh, okay, I'm gonna.
What do you want to say?
C'est un dérivé de la chaîne télévisée de Arte.
Okay, so Arte Radio is like a podcast producer that stems from a TV producer, TV channel.
Yeah,
a French TV channel.
And in 202, like for many, in almost 20 years ago, then they started to make podcasts online. So it was well before the iPod. It was a few years before the iPod. So the podcast is not a new thing in France. It was just more discreet. And we also had things like the stories. Okay, les fictions MP3, comment on pourrait dire ça?
Yeah, I believe you can say like fictional stories in RSS feeds, because we have like one of the first one in France. That it's like one of the first worldwide. It was in France.
Ah yeah? Are you talking about the Journal Beck?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was talking about this
Like
because I don't know you, but I discovered this when I was like 12 years old. So I don't.
It started like in the really early 2000s, right?
Yeah, really, and so it was not RSS feed, but it was possible to download it online. It was like the old podcast thing, and I didn't know when I was 12 years old that I was listening to podcast. No, I was listening to Donjon Albert, but maybe that's why today I'm doing podcast. I think also, and you have so Arte Radio and Donjon Albert. Almost at the same time, they were doing podcast, but they maybe didn't know yet. And through the years, now in this year, we have major studio that are doing fiction audio. They can now mix together 20 years after. So that's the problem, and not that's a thing in France. We like to separate things. It's hard to mix the media, and it's maybe with the COVID we succeed to mix something, but I think it's a very important thing to think about France. We like to do things separated, and everyone has a strict thing. So that said, I wanted to talk to you,
Just need
Anne-Claire,
to say that both of them, like Arte Radio and Holbeck Dungeon, still like produce things right now. Like
they're still existing. That's amazing. Anne-Claire, I wanted to ask you, because you live in Barcelona. So for you, what difference do you see between podcast in Spain and podcast in France?
The main difference I could see is that the public radio here in Spain is not as important as the ones we have in France. So to me, for people, they are less educated, or they are less aware of the audio content they could hear, and so there is some people from time to time that tell me that they are listening to podcasts, but it is not as known, as famous as the wave, the podcast wave we have experienced in France. So this is still something to be built in Spain, although there is a lot of Spanish spoken program, but from the South America part from Mexico, from Argentina, and so on. So there's people from Spain listening to programs in Spanish from Mexico and Latin America countries.
Okay, yeah. Is that also a thing we have to say in France? There is a radio culture. Everyone, a lot of people listen to radio, even if it's an old media, even if there is television. There is still something friends like to listen to radio. I think there was a study about the trust in the media, and radio was the first.
It's
One
the
of the
most
first.
trusted.
They trust more the radio than the TV and the internet and then social media. And just Benjamin, to get to know you more, can you tell us when did you started to listen to podcast?
Well, you mentioned Nahelbeck Dungeon, so of course that, because I remember vividly like friends of mine giving me CDs where they had like copied the MP3s on it. But if I may like think about something that I was looking for myself, I believe the first podcast I ever listened to was in 2006. And it was like surprisingly a podcast made by the French magazine. So back then already there was like the written press was doing podcasts. I think we'll be talking about that a bit later. But it was a podcast from the Inrocks, les Inrocuptibles. So it's a magazine about music mostly. It was like the host was JD the DJ.
We kiss him, we say him hi.
Hi, JD. And it was a podcast about music, obviously, like discovering new bands, new artists. It was like a 20 or 30-minute podcast with music, something we can't really do right now. Well, maybe a bit now, but it's mostly difficult if you're not a radio station. And inspired me like to do my own too. I believe the first podcast show I ever produced was like 5 years later. I was 21, 22.
Okay, so yeah, you are doing this for a long time now.
Yeah, I've been doing this for a long time.
And are you still doing podcasts yourself?
I've been doing podcasts myself, like not last year, but the year before that, and I'm writing my next one right now. Yeah, I'm writing it for Slate, not for mine. It will be produced by Slate, but it will be mine.
Okay.
Because I miss like being on mic. I've done like radio shows and stuff, so I've been a host. Right now, it's been like 2 years where I've just been accompanying hosts, like a bit like you do, Anne-Claire, but just to help them make like the best podcast they could. So now I want to do my own again, like my fourth one or something. Because
when will we be able to listen to this little game?
Maybe the next, maybe September 21, something like that. I've just started writing it. I've just started writing it, so it takes time. It takes time.
For sure.
Okay, so just before we listen to your podcast in a year, let's take a look back at the past year in the podcast in France. So we had a lot of things in France like the past year. Not mention the COVID things, which maybe had a lot of consequences about. But is there an event that were for you major events on the past year in the French podcast world? Maybe Benjamin and Claire?
I have a few, I guess, but I believe maybe one of the most defining will be the rise, fall, and reinventing of the apps.
Yeah.
Maybe Anne-Claire would be chiming on that, but yeah, we've seen like a lot of new challengers, may I say, or new producers also, but really like just new people that wanted to hop on the train. Sometimes it went well. Sometimes it went not that well. And now we're left with some of them. Some of them are reinventing themselves thoroughly. So I believe that maybe what will be like if we pinpoint one thing aside of the COVID thing, it may be that, because it could have gone one way or the other. So it like somewhere where we branch off.
And you, Anne Claire?
And to me, it was the same, like all the Hunger Games and people like launching a first version of a proposal they have for the French market to listen to more podcasts, to discover more podcasts, and facing the market, facing the life, the reality, some changes that have been done. And I feel it's passionating to see how the French market is structuring itself around content, around app, around hybridal proposal. And yes, that's great, because I'm feeling that podcast is becoming a real subject, something from that's a trend, that's something that is like raising and will fade maybe. And to me, it won't fade before long time, I think.
Never.
But
So
this is from something that is raising, it's structuring, it's really growing, and I feel a lot of interesting moves will come soon.
Yeah, I mean, for most part of 2019, we were all joking like, "Oh, there's a new app every week or so." So
Yeah.
that's something that really
Sure.
points that it was important. And I think that in France, particularly, there's like the fact that Spotify like came and said, "We want you to podcast too," and there's like, thanks to them, there's like podcasts ads on the subway. That's something only a huge like company like them could do.
And
Yeah,
podcast is slowly like infusing, you said, the subway, books, events, and so on. So there is some bridges created from one universe to another. And to me, podcast is like ramping, like the its own bubble, and it's opening to many more people. And to me, it's great to foster creativity, to make it something like more common, more part of everyone's life, and not
Just for a few.
of a little group of passionate people.
yeah, I totally understand you, and I see that when I talk about podcast, usually I just first say, "Do you know the podcast?" And a few years ago, it was sometimes what, but what, c'est internet, bon, and now people know about it. People know, oh yeah, I heard about it. There's something with the radio. Now the word podcast, the word himself, the word podcast, everybody knows it.
Well, it's been around
And-
for like 20 years, so it was.
Yeah.
Thank God now they know what it is.
But now we can say that people know YouTube, and then they know podcast. But they actually, we will talk about it. Maybe they don't really know how to listen to podcast, and that's sometimes something that hurt. But yeah, I prepared some questions, but we can
You have scripts.
yeah, well, yeah. So maybe we can talk about this application, because yeah, as you told us, it was a major events like Magellan. Magellan, for international people who didn't heard about it, Magellan is as an application launched by a former president of the French national radio. His name is Mathieu Gallet, and the fact is that this man, he's very known by the media, and so when he launched this application, when he talked about it, everyone listened. He went to TV shows. He had articles on the press. So that's, for me, a good thing. We can think whatever we want about Magellan. They have some problems. They have some dramas. But the fact is that sorry. is what you're talking about, Anne-Claire, is that people get to know the podcast thanks to him. So maybe what do you think about Magellan, Benjamin?
Well, I think it was an idea, maybe not well executed. So as we know, like there was kind of problems because they took RSS feeds that didn't belong to them and stuff. Well, they don't belong to anyone really. It was like a major drama because you can always like stream RSS feeds, but if you don't ask permission to the owners, it's always a problem.
And make money,
especially if you make money off of it. Yeah. So they backtracked on that, but I think the idea was great. The idea was good. It's like just one place. It's once again, that's something we like said every few weeks in last year. It's like a new Netflix of podcasts. Okay, in France. So that's what it tried to be, and that's a problem really because you talked about YouTube, and YouTube is really easy. Like you want to see a video on the internet, more or less, you can just go on YouTube and you see it. For the podcast, it's a bit different, and it's not a bad thing, but you don't have a place where you can go. You can go on Apple Podcasts. It's like the first one that was there, maybe. Then you have now Spotify, etc. Podcast Addict. But that's what it tried to be, and it failed spectacularly. And then now they are trying something else entirely.
Did you understand what
they're trying to do right now?
Yeah.
What Magellan is right now? Well, it's an app where you can listen to things about one subject.
To me, there is like it's a refocus in terms of content and in terms of marketing, the way they are presenting the content they are offering to the listeners. So it's to me they have selected like one motivation of the podcast listener, which is to learn something about people, to refocus and to be inspired and to grow and to achieve themselves in their life, in their job, and so on. So they have chosen this motivation, and they have refocused their app on this like value proposition, and that's great because, as you said, like to be in the Netflix of podcasts required a lot of energy, a lot of everything, and to focus on one proper value proposition, to me it's smart, and I hope it will work for them, and above all it will work for a listener, and then they will find what they are looking for while listening to their content.
Yeah, why not, in fact? Like, why not? But I think it like ignites something that I think is a very French debate, and that was going on like last year and this year too, is it still a podcast? If you're like only in one app and you're not like on an RSS feed that you can subscribe to anywhere, is it still a podcast? And I believe like maybe I don't know if the other countries are asking themselves that, but it's a very French debate that was going on. Like it was a war.
We separate. We like to.
So it's not a podcast because it's just in one app. But I mean, if it's audio and if it's like listening on that you can listen to on demand, maybe it's just a podcast anyway.
To tell about the international people, in France, we have something called l'Académie Française. It's like a bunch of old guys who are telling what is the word we have to use about things. And they made a statement about podcast and say, no, it's not a good word. No. We don't have to use podcast. I think that they said we have to use audio à la demande. No,
it's audio on demand.
Audio on demand.
Yeah.
So just to tell you, in
but
France,
nobody uses it.
Oh wait.
They could have like taken the Canadian word, because I see we have like a question from Canada, but like balado, but they didn't. And anyway, everybody uses podcast, and it's good as is.
Yeah. Yes, I saw that was a Canadian people talking about the ad on Spotify. Yeah, we can use the word balado diffusion. I think it's a nice word, balado. But we in France we are used to podcast. So just to talk about the other application, there was another one called Sibel, which Also, I didn't quite understand what's going on with Sibel. Maybe do you know, Anne-Claire?
To me, it's another focus they have led, they have focused on the fictional part of podcast content, and they are focusing on family. To me, if I'm analyzing well the communication and the product strategy they are leading, so they are creating exclusive content from a studio or from partners they have creating content. And a few months ago, I can't remember when, but they put the firewall above. Before that, all the content was at free access, and now there's a paywall, and they are communicating on 20,000 members paying the price. It's like €3 per month, I think, and
Okay.
for me it's going pretty well since Amazon have invested into their capital. It's great. And to me, Amazon with Audible has had also this content strategy focused on narrative and fictional programs. So it makes sense. The two actors get along. So that's great.
Okay.
I didn't
Benjamin?
know Amazon invested in it. I mean, Sibel started a bit like Magellan in biting off more than they could chew. They started trying to be once again a Netflix of podcasts, and then they narrowed it. And I believe they had to. If you want to have a paid subscription right now in France for podcasts, you have to be very narrow and not just an app where you can listen to every podcast, because there's already apps that do it for free and that do it well. So you have to have an editorial precision or something. So that's what they're trying to do right now.
Yeah, for the other application, there is Podcast Addict. Personally, I use it, but I have no conflict to talk about this. And it's a guy named Xavier Guyemanet, who actually lives in Santa Barbara, in United States. And he left a few years ago France because he couldn't develop his application in France. It was too complicated. And he's doing it almost alone by himself. And the fact is, sometimes he have to struggle. So he have problem with Google Play, because it's an app you can only have on Android. Because he said there is Apple Podcast for all the iOS, so he didn't feel the need to develop it on the iOS. But sometimes you have the problems, especially during the COVID period, because he had the word COVID somewhere in the application. Google forbid his application for a few days, and it was just he didn't know what to do. It was hard to do. It was hard for him because he's alone, because he's not a big company with a lot of money. And Claire, I see yourself smiling.
The very same issue with Facebook, then Google, then Apple. The few past week, Google banned my application too, based on privacy problems. We luckily could resolve it really quickly, but I was like, no, my is out of the mobile application store. I was totally panicked. So,
oh my God.
And I'm alone too, managing the application and the training program, so I can totally figure myself what he has left.
And how do you? Now it's okay. Now we can check your application everywhere. All the problems are solved now.
There's an interesting question from live viewer. They ask us, do you think that the scale of France, that's cute, commute times, overall distance can be a break for the development of podcast over there? So what do you think, guys?
Yeah,
I
go.
mean, we were not like the biggest country ever, but first of all, when I can see it when I put on a show, online a show, we listen to in France, but also in French-speaking countries. You were talking about the same thing with Spanish and Claire, but there's like people in Canada. We have some of them there, but also Belgium or Switzerland, etc., that are listening to French podcasts. So the scale is not just French scale; it's like the French-speaking countries scale. But in France, especially, I mean, we can see that commute times play a role because most of the podcasts like are about 20-30 minutes, and it's like the commute time here in France. I don't know if distances play a role or not in the question, but if you like look at the last 2 years, you can see that for now it's still like growing. When we are not in peak podcast yet, in listenings habits.
And to me, this question is focusing on one habit, one special moment when people can listen to podcasts. But there's many other moments, and when we look at French studies about podcast listening habits, there's many more, like doing sport, doing homework, doing like every other
Washing dishes.
Yeah.
and then
But it's still something you do kind of alone.
Sorry?
It's still something you do kind of alone.
Yes.
Like there's not a really like group listening thing of podcasts.
No.
In the family, I have some listeners on my podcast say, we'll listen to your podcast in the car with the kids.
Yeah.
Or with my
if
parents.
it's kids friendly, yeah, you can. If it's kids friendly, of course.
Yeah. Sometimes my podcasts aren't very kids friendly, so that's why in the beginning of my episode, like I'm doing sometimes an episode about the puberty, which talk about the very
Teenage years.
yeah, but in the 18th century, so
Yeah.
it's historical as well. But at the beginning of the podcast, I say, okay, if you're listening to this with your kids, maybe not today. Just to warn you. Are you ready? Okay.
It's good that you do it, though.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
very important. I wanted to talk to you about something also about the subjects that we talk in the podcast in French.
That's good because we have like one question about it.
Question about it.
So good timing, Fanny.
I know. So I see that the question is about sport. Yeah, I think sports it's a subject that it's not a big subject in France, but we saw that every football club have the big football club now have their own podcast made by a studio, but still.
Soccer for American fans.
Soccer.
Yeah, well, the question is about like increasing culture, podcast, sports, or something else. Maybe we have to start by saying that if like you put aside radio shows from the national radios and stuff, what ignited like the podcast craziness that's right now in France, there are like one topic above all else, it's feminism. It started really with like people telling their real stories. It was not about feminism, but then it was. So that's the thing that have been maybe developed the more. And of course, culture in like all of its form, podcasts about TV shows, podcasts about reality TV, podcasts about movies, podcasts just speaking about like one TV show or the MCU universe or something. So that's what we are seeing right now. But an increase, I don't think so. Maybe like right now, I think the next step is fiction. But we are talking about everything here in France because we love to talk about things and debate. So we have to like acknowledge that feminism played a big role in the fact that podcasts went kind of mainstream. It's not still mainstream. It's not yet mainstream, but kind of, we can say, and other way of fighting and such, like anti-racism, anti-homophobia, etc. But I'm not sure we will see like a sudden increase in sports podcasts like in 2 months.
I agree.
Type of podcast popping strongly from 1 year and a half, I would say. It's the business podcast, like focusing on startup founders, on any project leaders, and
the LinkedIn podcast. I told them, for me it's a podcast people share on LinkedIn, not on Facebook.
Depends, but it's true that podcast has been a way for people to connect with other people, and the startup fire is really high in France for 2 years, 3 years, and so podcast has been a way for people to network, and it's used a lot in this way.
And Anne-Claire, is there any other subjects or that are trending on Eco? New podcast maybe?
On Eco, personal development is on the top chart a lot, like Emotions, a program from Louis, or Transfer. It's not personal development, but it's like people sharing their feeling, and
we're talking about people connecting themselves, and I was like, yeah, that's the stuff. That's what we do.
Yeah, and Slate, it's like your subject.
Well, I mean, it's the subject of Slate. It's like about the society and how we live in it. So of course, but if we're talking a bit about transfer, I was going to say so transfer. That was like launched 4 years ago by Slate, and it was one of the first big podcasts by a media. Even if it's not a big media, and it still is right now. Maybe if you put aside once again the radio shows that are just listened to in replay, it may very well be like the first podcast in France, the most listening to, and it's about people just telling you something about their lives, but something incredible and something touching and moving. So connecting people, like you said. And we are very proud to producing this.
Yeah, of course.
It's a marvelous podcast.
And I don't know if you saw this also, but last year I was saying to myself, now we don't have every subject in podcasts. There's still myth things, but now since I think February, and also since March, since the COVID, and also I think every subject has a podcast on it.
And COVID has boosted a lot the children content, and
that's what I was going to say. Yeah,
it was before March, before spring. You could notify few of them, like 3, 4, less than 10, and from spring, with this specific focus we had on our children, there is a lot of podcasts that have been created to
accommodate
them. And see, if you talk about COVID, and apart for what we said, is there any things you think COVID has influence in podcast in France?
Maybe it helped people like launch themselves and like try to do 1 or 2 or 3 episodes. Did it influence anything else? Maybe because, it's like struck everyone in the purse, everyone in their wallet. So if you can produce new show because you don't have any money, what do you do? We had like studios and producers that stopped some of their podcasts to like once again like narrow it down to 3 or 4 or 5 instead of 10 or something. So maybe it like we could think it would like stop a bit the evolution and the growth of podcasts in France. But in fact, I believe that if you look at the numbers, more and more people started listening to podcasts during this period. For like the 15 first days, it was the opposite. People couldn't find time to listen to it because there was no commute anymore. Of course, there was no like commuting anymore. You have to take care of your children or something, so you don't know when you can listen to podcasts. And then like past March, it all went on the opposite side. It went skyrocketing. A lot of producers have set their records of numbers during this period. So and people stay. Like if you do good shows, people discover you and then they stay. And we talked a bit about this in the beginning. The major thing here in France right now is how do you help people to discover new podcasts, new or old, in fact, not just podcasts. And in a way, this period of time helped, and people stayed because in France, we produce good shows.
Yeah, of course we do. And Claire, did you saw something that changes with the COVID?
On my application, it was like tremendous. I had a growth of 70% of activities, and it has lasted like the 3 months of and then yes, it was great. And for this, the type of content that the users of my application would listen to has changed a bit. The business and the startup founders podcast have
fallen.
Yes, decreased a lot, and people were more in the mood of being relaxed, being reassured. So personal development content, they benefited of that.
I also saw it, and I'm doing a podcast about history, about medieval ages, which is maybe something people like because it's not connected with the news.
You did one about the plague during COVID.
Actually, no. I just made a podcast, and it was I recorded it in January about. Oh yeah, thank you, Dave, for the Twitter thing. It was recorded in January, and in fact, in this episode, we laughed about this. It was an episode about the plague in the 18th century and how the state react to the plague, how they react to each other, and at the beginning of the episode, I was like joking, just like maybe you're listening to this podcast in the future when there is just RSS feed technology, no
I
more.
remember that.
People like to be knowledge, I can do it.
So I learned. I published the episode, and I think it was maybe the best time to publish it because it helped people to get a step back and say, okay, this situation is not new in the humanity. We already lived a situation like this. So I received a few messages to people say, okay, this helped me to maybe relax and say, we're going through. It's okay. We only have like not a long time, so just to finish, can we talk about money? Because maybe something that's new in France is like for like 2-3 years there is money in podcast. That's why all the media are talking about it because it's growing up because of the money. The content are still very good, but now there is some ad. And for you, what maybe will be the next step for the monetization? I don't know if you say it in English, monetization. Benjamin, for you, maybe with Slate, you're in the media, you're not alone. So do you think publicity will increase?
Well, it will, of course. I mean, if I talk for our podcast, it will, because as of right now, there are no ads, so there will be in the future. Well, there are just like sometimes a little ads, but not really that much. And it sets us apart over of the other producers, because if you like listen to podcasts from other big producers in France, there's already ads. So it's coming already, like you said. The fact is, it's coming like a little bit slow right now, and it was slowed, in fact, by the COVID crisis. Because what's the point of putting up ads if it's just like you get a bit of money but not enough to help you really produce something? And we don't want to like put up some ads and get just some euros that will serve to nothing, that will amount to nothing. So it will come, and it will be like in the US, there's like ads in the start of podcast, ads at the end, ads in the middle. I don't know if in France we'll have ads everywhere.
Some
we're
people are beginning to do this
trying
in
to.
France.
Yeah, I mean, why not? In fact, I'm not against money in podcasts. You have to have money if you want to produce good shows, and no. Let me rephrase that. You can produce good shows without money, of course, and with passion and stuff. But if you want to employ people, you have to pay them. And if you want to pay them, you have to have money. So that's our case, because we are like doing podcasts professionally, and we employ journalists, music composers, etc., etc. We have our own studio, so we don't have to pay for that. Well, we already paid for it, and so you have to get the money somewhere.
Just to say also, I think the majority of podcasts produced in France are produced by just people in their room, in their bedroom, like I'm doing right now.
They're not amateurs, but
not amateurs, but doing like a hobby.
Yeah,
like and it's very important, because I represent them, because I'm doing it also alone, and just to talk about the money in France. I'm getting I have the listeners are giving me money to make my podcast on a platform that's called Tipeee. It's like Patreon. Anglo-Saxon people know Patreon. In France, we have Tipeee. And it really, really increased a lot last month, like a lot. And I'm so happy, because for a few months, I'm telling myself I'm going to live with the podcast. And it's a few years ago, it was a hobby. It is still kind of hobby for me. And I didn't believe I could one day live with my podcast, and people giving me money for this. And just to tell you something, last month, a woman I don't know, she didn't even give me a message. She gave me 500 euros. And I don't know who she is. I just text her like, "Oh, thank you so much. Who are you?" It's and she didn't answer. I don't. I couldn't get in touch with her. But it's amazing. It's like, oh my God, and that's why in September I launched a lot of episodes, because I say, okay, I have to do something with this. I have to make
well, it's a proof that people are willing to pay for something. I know that in France we have a problem with that. Like, something was free, because podcasts were free for a while.
They are still free. My podcast is still free.
So how do you make money with something that is free? And can you? Should you do? And it's something that ignites a big fire when you talked about it with hobbyists, with people that just are not making them for money. But are the podcasts better because they're paid for? No. There are like very, very good free podcasts, and it's a good thing. But we don't have to shy away from it. Sometimes you have to have money if you want to produce something, like you did.
From my point of view, when you're thinking about monetizing your podcast, there is another way of thinking. It's to to consider your podcast as the first stone of the whole project you want to build. And it's not the podcast itself you want to monetize, it's the whole project. And we can see that some studio like Louis Media, like Binge Audio, they have monetized not the podcast themselves, but a book, but
newsletters,
but other products they would sell based on the brand that they have built with their podcast, with their project. And to me, that's a creative way to approach the monetization of podcasts, to see how you can expand your podcast to become a whole project that could live for a long run, as you said, Fanny, as you do.
And for my part, I always say, I always explained why I ask money. I say, okay, I can keep on doing my podcast like this, but if I want to have like a great illustration, I have to ask to someone, because I don't draw. I just do something on Paint, which is not very good. And if I want to publish more episode, I have to ask help, because I can't find more day in the week to do this. So maybe I think it's something that's why my listeners give me money, because they say, okay, I understand why she wants to develop the podcast and I want to help her. So, okay, I will give her money. So I think it takes times, because I launched my TP like almost 2 years ago. And it's just few months, it's a lot of money that maybe I could just live with it. And it takes times. We don't have a lot of time, so I think we can maybe finish and talk about the podcast we listened. And I start, if it's okay for you. I would like to give advice of a French podcast and an international podcast. And first, I would like to talk about BNews USA. In the title, you may think, oh, it's an American podcast. Actually, no, it's a French podcast. It's two guys living in USA, in Louisiana, near New Orleans. Okay, I know this is a special way to say the town. And they talk about beer in America, the American beer, and also the Cajun culture, the music, and it's really, really good show. You must listen to them. They're so nice. It's like you're sharing a beer with two friends every week. That's a weekly show that's not usual in France, and you have to listen to them. So it's BNews USA. It's from the company label. How do you say a label in English? No,
you can say label.
Label. Okay, from the label Podcut, and really BNews USA. You will be very happy to listen to them. And another podcast.
And sometimes they diss Slate.fr, but I like them anyway.
Oh.
But sometimes they diss us. Shout out
Dramas,
to them. I love you still, babe.
And I would like to give advice of a Moroccan podcast, which is Radio Marif. It's in French, sometimes in Arabic, but it's Radio Marif talks about. First, they started to talk about Moroccan soccer, because they wanted to talk in their own way. And now, the thing I like the most is they talk about the Moroccan history, and it's, oh my God, very, very interesting. I give you advice to listen to this. It's Moroccan history from every part, every angle, every subject. Benjamin, what are your recommendations?
Well, of course, first of all, I have to say, like, just go listen to some Slate.fr podcast. But of course, and there's like a lot, especially right now. But if I have to like get out of our little woods, I'd say lately I've been listening to something that's like was discussed a bit in France. It's a podcast from France Culture, a 7-parter called La Séparation, and it's like a podcast that starts in 1997 and end right now. So like it's a dream for a producer. Like there are 23 years of of tapes and of recordings about a couple from their wedding day to today. And that's very interesting. That's something like I wish we could have done, like really. And I did not like listen to your recommendation to like have a podcast from not France, from anywhere,
it's
but I
okay.
want to give a shout out to a podcast you know very well, Fanny. It's Écoute ça. So listen to this in English, sorry, from Dam. Dam. And it's a podcast about music. Right now, it's a bit different than he usually does because he does covers. But
he talk about covers and
yeah, right now he talks about covers. But usually he takes a song or an album and dissects it, and it's very, very appealing. So, and he can play music too. So you listen to him and you discover something maybe.
And Claire, what are your recommendations?
I also have 2 French recommendations. Sorry, you're
People are going to learn French thanks to us. So.
Good luck.
The first one is really easy to remember for people because it's a typical French expression, which is "et voilà." Et voilà. It's a podcast with children, really creative, with an original music created for the podcast. And the aim of this podcast is to consider children as real adults, a real person, and it's really, really funny and really interesting, and it helps you to have a different point of view of how you could speak and act with children. It's really funny. And the other one is Double V from Arte. It's a podcast with 5 episodes, I think, about the way we are building our lives on social networks. And it's a mix of testimony, experts' opinion, and also really funny like audio parts from archive, animal sound that could pop in the episode, and it's really great, and I like it a lot.
Okay, so people, you have to listen to French podcast. We give you lots of advice. Hi, Dave, you're back.
Yes, Fanny and Claire, Benjamin, thank you so much for taking part in International Podcast Day. I know our community loved it. We had some good little comments and questions and answers. Thank you for taking those. And from Steve and I, from the International Podcast Day team, we want to thank you for representing yourselves, your industry, and of course, France as well. So excellent job. We really appreciate you contributing this year.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much, Dave.
Absolutely.
I can't wait to listen to the other hosts from other countries.
Yep, 26 countries, 60 plus podcasters. You 3 have been amazing. We really appreciate it. So happy International Podcast Day, everybody, and have a great day.
Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.